Hello, this is Gary Rogers with AGS Stone. And in this short video, we're going to discuss how to calculate countertop square footage. So you've decided to replace your countertops, whether it be in your kitchen or bath, and you would like to know what it's going to cost you. To prepare an estimate, we'll need measurements of your existing countertops, along with any dimensional modifications that you may wish to make to the existing layout. Once determined, we can assist you with the selection of materials and options to arrive at a budgetary price for your project. Let's discuss the measuring process in more detail. What you will need to get started in this process is nothing more than a tape measure and a blank sheet of paper, and maybe a little bit of patience. So let's discuss a kitchen, and you have countertops in there that you're tired of and would like to replace. Where do you start? What we're going to want to do first is make sure that your countertops are accessible. So if you have a lot of things on the countertops and can't really access the back wall where the countertop is actually meeting the back wall in your room, that's where the area we need to get to. Then you'll want to clear off those areas first. And before you actually start measuring, you'll want to put together a stick drawing. And I'm just going to bounce ahead here quickly and show you what I mean. Very simple, crude stick drawing, which is an illustration of your countertop layout. And I'm no artist, as you can tell, but you see that these are just a very rough sketch, which includes dimensions and some other basic information that will help us in determining countertop square footage at this stage in the process. So what you'll want to do is, with your tape measure, now that you've got a stick drawing of your layout, is to take and measure each back wall section of your countertop. So you're going to want to start in a corner and measure your countertop length along the back wall. And you're going to want to do that around the room. And what you're going to end up with is length dimensions for each of those countertop sections, and also the width. Now the width will likely be somewhat consistent, at least on most of the countertop sections. Standard width is typically 25.5 inches. Your cabinets are 24 inches, and then we have an 1.5 inch overhangs here at 25.5. We're going to want to identify wall locations and where any backsplash will be installed. It's also helpful to note where the fridge, stove, and sink locations are, and we'll go back to the drawings here in just a moment. Now, there's another option for you. I would still proceed with preparing this simple sketch, but you can then, if you wish, download our worksheet determining countertop square footage from our website, and you can take and transfer those measurements to the worksheet and actually work to a bottom line square footage figure. If you don't want to do that, the sketches will help us to do it for you. And so when we're meeting either virtually or in person here in our showroom, once we have that information, we can actually help you determine square footage. So here, again, we have these sketches, and there are different layouts that are quite common in Florida, and I've got my pointer working here, so you'll see a streaking ball. What I want to do first is look at this countertop section here, and so we call this a bat wing, and it's kind of shaped like a bat wing. So it has these angles. Now they're not right angles. We would call those obtuse angles. And in Florida, we see a lot of this design. What you want to do here is measure this back wall dimension. Or if this was open and there wasn't a wall here, it would be the outer edge dimension. We don't want to measure the inner edges. we want to measure the outer edges. What we're looking for are the longest lengths of each segment. So here, what do we see? We see dimensions. So this section here, I've noted 52 inches. I've also noted that this is a wall, and I've noted that we want to have backsplash here. Now this is somewhat redundant. We can't have backsplash without a wall, but I've noted both. So in this particular case, we will incorporate backsplash in this section. I've noted that this whole segment here is going to be 25.5 inches in width. And then as we follow this, the next section here you can see is 63 inches, and that will also include a backsplash. And also just put an abbreviation for sink, so it doesn't have to be accurately located. It's just that we know in this particular area we will have a sink. And then the other section of the bat wing is here. We have 51 inches in length, and that will also require a backsplash. Now above it, we have our high bar, and the high bar follows the angle of the bat wing countertop. And again, we want to measure the outer edge, not the inner edge. You'll get different measurements. We want the longest lengths. And so we measure the outer edge, and in this case, we measured 73, and in this section, we measured 16. The width of the high bar is going to be 16 inches. So with that information, we have enough measurement detail to actually calculate square footage for this section. Now, there are two other sections in this particular kitchen. And over here, I've noted with just the letter F that this is a fridge. We have a countertop section here, which is 38 inches long, and it will include a backsplash. There is a wall. We'll have a stove in between, and then the other section is 61 inches in length, and we'll also have a backsplash. Both these sections will be 25 inches in width, which is consistent, as I said, in a lot of layouts, 25.5 inches will be common, or somewhere close to that. Now we've got a couple other designs here that we're showing. So this is what we would describe as a U-shaped kitchen. And what we have are essentially two L-shaped segments separated by a stove. So this is a stove. The sink is located over here, and the fridge between these sections here. This does have a high bar. Now, I didn't note the outside length of the high bar, but there's no angles to this, so the length of the high bar is going to be same as the sink segment. And so we have 101 inches here, and we are going to have a backsplash between the countertop and the high bar, and so that's what I've noted. Now, this will be 25.5 inches in width, and that'll be consistent. I'm not noting any other dimensions, so we'll apply 25.5 as the width with all the sections. The L, the other portion of the L here is going to be 66 inches in length and also will require a backsplash. As I mentioned, we have a stove, and then the other side of the stove, we've got a 70-inch section with a backsplash, and then where the L turns to meet the fridge, we have a 65.5-inch length with a backsplash. Fridge, and then a 24-inch section here with a backsplash. Now I've made these just all just whole increments. You can have fractions, and I wouldn't get any more. I don't think at this stage you'd have to be more accurate than rounding to the nearest half-inch. So round to the nearest half-inch and round up, and that should be sufficient. And then the final one here is an L-shaped kitchen that includes, I should say, an island and also two sections on either side of a stove. And so same exercise, back wall dimension here. There is a wall, 110-inch length with a backsplash. There's a wall on this side here as well, and we'll include a backsplash. And then we also have wall on this side, the 65-inch length with a backsplash, all 25.5 inches wide. Our island will be 60 inches in length and 37.5 inches in width. And then the sections around the stove and fridge here, 38-inch section similar to the other layouts with a backsplash, stove, and then a 36-inch section, all 25.5 inches in width. And so we've noted the backsplash locations. And that's really it. From that information, we'll have enough to calculate square footage for you. Now, I mentioned the worksheet, and this is just a glimpse at it. Again, you can download this on our website, and it's essentially fill in the blanks. When you're all said and done, you'll have a total number of square inches in countertop area, and then a simple formula to convert that into square feet. And that's all explained to you. Not required to do this. You can provide us with a sketch, and we can do this, but you're more than welcome to if you're curious and would like to know the square footage before you meet with us. Some other things to consider. I want to talk just briefly about seaming, what an angle factor is, and what our oversized piece charges. So first, as it relates to seaming, we, and I also know our clients, like to avoid seams wherever possible. Seams are often required though, and more so in kitchens and bathrooms, but seams are often a requirement. Now we do some things here to hopefully make those seams a little less visible. I mean, you can't erase a seam, it's there, it'll be seen. But we use what's called a seam phantom, which is a device that actually makes the seams as tight as possible. So one of the things that you see with seams sometimes is they're actually a little open at the top, where the visible part, the part you see, the surface. And so you'll see, you know, kind of a wider than you'd like to see seam or strip that runs across that surface that is visible. If you can close that gap so there's less of a gap between the two pieces coming together, then the seam is going to be, the seam reveal, the part that you see, is going to be minimized. And so the seam phantom that we use does help us to clean that up so that the seams are as tight as they can be. So why would we need a seam? Well, first and most importantly, the length and width of a countertop section could exceed the slab size, and we're seeing larger islands and larger kitchens, and so it's not impossible to think that you could have a countertop section that could exceed in length or in width the dimensions of a slab. Slabs typically average around 60 square feet, and that does vary. So they're roughly 10 feet long, 120 inches long by 60 inches, you know, 60 to 72 inches in height. So if any countertop section won't fit into that slab, then that would be one reason to have a seam. The sections may get too large to handle safely, and that could be the nature of the material that you've selected. Some materials are more fragile than others, and we have to be really careful handling them. It could be where we have to transport it within your home and trying to get it in place. It could be that these sections have to go between walls, and so we have to be able to get this large piece between adjoining walls, and so that might require seaming because it's just too difficult to get it between walls without breaking the piece or damaging the walls. If we have to, you know, if there's a sink or a cooktop cutout, that would be another reason for a seam. If you think about, for instance, a sink, you've got this hole, it could be a fairly large hole in your countertop for a sink, and what can happen is when we're transporting that material or trying to put it in place, that large hole in the material could be a breakage point. Certainly the material is going to be more fragile when there's a large hole in it somewhere. And so depending on the layout and the sink selected or cooktop location or size of cooktop, those are reasons why we might have to also incorporate a seam. And then finally, layout constraints and material utilization. You know, our pricing is based on a certain utilization of material. And also, the flow of the material may be such that that we have to manipulate it in such a way that a seam may be a necessity to have it, come out looking the way you'd like it to look without going through significantly more material, which also adds to cost. And what we're trying to do is give you a nice looking countertop and to do it at a reasonable price. Angle factors. When you have that bat wing that we described earlier, and you can see this little sketch that I put over here, an angle factor is to address this problem. When we're doing an angled piece like this, we try to avoid seaming at each of these junctions, because that seam is going to be a little longer because that's an angled seam. Instead of just going straight across, this distance here between those 2 points is actually greater. And so we don't like seaming at those points. However, seaming there would allow us to utilize material more efficiently. But since we want to try to avoid seams wherever possible, we end up, often cutting sections of this. Now, maybe we still have to seam it somewhere, but we typically don't want to seam it here. And because of that, we end up with a whole section of material here that we can't use. And so that becomes useless, and we'll call it scrap. It's not large enough to do anything with. And we have that same issue, as you can see over here. The angle factor allows us to account for this because our pricing is based on a certain utilization of material. And when we're doing these bat wings from past experience, we know that we're going to use more material to make that look right. And so that's why we apply that angle factor. And it's not on every section, it's only on those sections where we have angles that are not 90 degrees. And that's what you see here. And then finally, the oversized piece charge. This is a requirement to really address the risks and costs of handling large pieces. As I mentioned, we see larger kitchen islands, we see these larger countertop sections, and as these sections grow in width and length, they become more dangerous to handle, and sometimes require additional equipment or manpower, or it's just the fact that it's a much riskier proposition for us. Remember, this material has to be handled multiple times in our fabrication shop, being transported to your home and also installed in your home. And when we handle these large pieces, there is a greater risk of breakage of not only the material, but of equipment, and hopefully not of a human being. But certainly the risks are greater when we're working with these large pieces. So if the piece is 108 inches or greater in length, or the piece is 25 square feet or greater in total area, we will apply this oversized piece charge, which is $10 per square foot for that section only. It doesn't apply to the whole kitchen or bathroom, but applies to that section. And of course, we may not know that until we come out and laser template everything and actually do a layout on our CAD system. But we try to catch this and give you a heads up when we can ahead of time that this may be likely, because we know you're trying to come up with a budget. We want to be reasonably close in terms of the budget that we help you arrive at. So you've taken your measurements and either calculated your own square footage, or you have a sketch, and you're going to meet with us in one of two ways, either virtually through a Zoom meeting or in our showroom. If we're meeting virtually in a Zoom meeting, then I would like to encourage you to send that diagram, that layout drawing ahead so that we can be prepared for our discussion. I've noted here where to send it, sales@agsstone.rocks. I would also like you to send pictures of each wall. So if you're doing your kitchen and as you remember, you measured the back wall lengths of countertop sections, if you just take a picture of each of those sections so we can actually see it, that can be a big help to us. Allows us to visualize a space. We can also help you once we see how the room is laid out and the colors that you're working with and the textures that we may have some be able to help you in material selection as well. So having pictures along with your sketch, if it's a Zoom meeting, sending those out ahead can be helpful. Send them to sales@agsstone.rocks and just reference your last name. If you're going to meet us in our showroom, I would encourage you to either call us or get onto our website and schedule your visit. We're trying to do these showroom visits by appointment, and that way we can spend more time with you, uninterrupted time, once we know you're coming and can plan ahead for your visit. So that is a more efficient use of your time, I think. If you schedule a visit, you can go to our website and schedule it there, or you can call us and we'd be happy to put it on the calendar. When you come to visit us in a showroom, we would like you to bring that sketch or in addition to the sketch, the worksheet. If you've filled that out already, that's fine. Also pictures, as I mentioned already for our Zoom discussion, having pictures is helpful. In addition to pictures of your space, you may have some pictures, whether you've been on Pinterest or house.com, other sites where you found some pictures of rooms that really appeal to you, a look that you'd like to try to capture with your design. All that information is helpful. Any colors, anything that's in the room that you're trying to work with, and you have samples of it that you can bring along, whether it's a tile that you're not going to replace, or a paint chip, or whatever it might be. That can also help you when you're working to select materials. If you're not replacing your cabinetry, you may actually bring us like a drawer from your cabinet where we can actually have have a sample of your cabinet finish with us to look at, whether it be countertop materials or tile. That can also be helpful. When we're done with your visit, we should have enough information to put together a preliminary budget. We'll need to have selected at least one material option, and also talked about sink selection, edge detail. So there are a few other things that we'll need to know, and these can be just your first picks. They don't necessarily have to be your final ones. But when you leave, we'll have enough information to put together a preliminary budget that we then can email you, and within a short period of time, you'll have at least an idea what this project's going to cost and whether it makes sense to pursue it with us. And so with that, I'd like to thank you for your time, and we're always available to answer any questions you have. You can reach us in the office. You can email us at that sales@agsstone.rocks. We look forward to talking with you about your project soon. Thank you.